everyone, Milton here with Adeptus Adequate. I know it's been a little bit. I've been real busy. I'm going to put up a video soon talking about some of what I've been up to and what's coming up for the channel. But I wanted to talk today about the Deathwatch matchup. So, this is a series of, well, they're supposed to be shorter videos, but I can't stop talking. Focusing on the most important operatives, ploys, equipment, and how to approach different matchups in Kill Team. If you have any additional thoughts, please put them in the comments section. I would love to see them. I've certainly learned a lot from the community as well. But why Deathwatch? Well, they are one of the newest teams in the game, and they're already really popular. A lot of people have been playing them, and I think that you're likely going to see them a lot on tables near you. So it's important to have a plan for them, like with any team. And the Deathwatch are a 5-model Space Marine team. They are sort of a standard Space Marine chassis, but +1 wound on everything, so they are pretty sturdy. They have 2 faction rules. First up is the Veteran Astartes rule. This works just like the Astartes rule, but it has kind of an extra bonus, which is that when they are counteracting, they each get to do 2 1 APL actions instead of just 1. This is like the Angels of Death, Firefight, Ploy, Wrath and Vengeance, except the whole team gets it. So, although there are only 5 operatives, their action economy is really not all that bad. The Special Issue Ammunition rule allows them to add an additional keyword to pretty much any of their weapons other than explosive grenades and melt-a-bombs. This is really important because this gives them a little bump in lethality for all of the incidental shooting that allows them to fairly reliably reposition, dash, and then shoot and kill an elf in one action, where a lot of the other Space Marine teams might need 2 with most of their bolt weapons. So, important to keep in mind, they do get to use this once per turning point, although they have an equipment that can let them do it an additional time. Alright, sorry, I forgot I had my headset on. So, let's talk a little bit about operatives. They have 11 different specialists. And I'm not going to talk about them all in depth. I'm going to try and keep this pretty snappy here. But I do want to talk about the operatives that I think we are most likely to see. The first is the Deathwatch Sergeant, has a plasma pistol and a power weapon, and then allows them to use a strategy ploy, a firefight ploy for free, as long as he's alive. And they can select an additional piece of equipment. So this guy just gives them a ton of value and has really relevant shooting and melee. I think we're likely to see this in the majority of matches. The Aegis Veteran, this is their shield guy. He has a 2-up save, he has a bolt pistol, whatever, and then he has a power maul and storm shield. That's 5 attacks on 3s, 4/6 with shock and shield allowing him to block twice with a success instead of once. And then he has the storm shield, but we don't care about that because piercing, whatever, we don't have that. The Aegis is a really good tool. That said, there are ways to play around him. One, by just playing around him and trying to push where he isn't on the board. The other option is to go through him and to just kill the guy. And we do have pretty good options for that. Although he has a 2-up save, he doesn't love getting crit a bunch. And what do elves do? We throw a bunch of crits at people until they're dead. So, your various lethal weapons are good here. Howling Banshees, being able to charge, Rain of Tears, fall back and then shoot can hang a lot of damage. And then the Striking Scorpion Exarch with the Claw, having Brutal, having the lethal 5-up, can push a lot of damage through on this guy because if he doesn't roll any crits, he's not going to be using shock or shield. So, we do have options to deal with this guy, and you can generally count on him being on the table and pushing up the center of the table, standing on a point and causing problems. Next up is the Blademaster Veteran. Now, the Blademaster Veteran is a guy with a brutal power sword who can potentially fight multiple models in one activation if there's multiple models nearby, so don't group up into him. But I think the most important thing here is the Adaptive Swordsmanship rule, which allows him to ignore changes to the hit stat of the Xenophase Blade, so Howling Banshees, Banshee Masks will not reduce his hit stat, and then he can resolve a success before the normal order to block. So, same as the Scream That Steals. He is fairly tough to kill in melee, so that's important to keep in mind. And again, I think this is someone that we are likely to see on the table a lot. The next operative I want to talk about is the Demolisher Veteran. Now, the Demolisher, I don't think is the best pick for them here, but you probably will see it a lot because he has a 6/7 heavy thunder hammer, has access to a bunch of rerolls, has damage reduction in melee, which stacks with another source of damage reduction, making him very hard to kill in melee. And then Deathwatch have a piece of equipment called digiweapons, which when they are fighting, deals a point of damage before they start rolling dice. So, the Demolisher veteran, if he rolls a crit with his 5 dice with Ceaseless, can just one-shot an elf on the charge, and there's not much you can do about it. Unless you have a Banshee using Scream that Steals. I don't think it's great, but you may well see it. It is important to keep in mind that if they have this guy in digiweapons, he can one-shot somebody, so be very careful about that. And have a plan to kill him that doesn't involve charging and dealing very little damage to the guy in melee. Up next is the Disruptor veteran. Now, the Disruptor is a Phobos chassis guy, so he's got 13 wounds and move 7, and he has a lethal 5-up bolt carbine. Pretty good. The reasons that he's most relevant, he has the advanced Omni Scrambler, so it's similar to the Phobos Omni Scrambler, but they get to roll a d6 to see how many activations your model is stalled for. So if you have something staged really aggressively and the Disruptor can see it, they can sort of freeze your model and give them time to deal with it. There is some counterplay here in that if they do that, you can then use Dance of Death to swap models' positions and move somebody that isn't scrambled up into position to be aggressive, so that is a good option here. But it's generally best if you can just play around the Omni Scrambler and not get scrambled. Second, he has the Auspex Triangulation rule, which allows them to use one of their firefight ploys, the Advanced Auspex Scan, for free if this guy can see the target and he's not in melee. We'll talk about that ploy in a little bit. The Deathwatch Headtaker is another Phobos guy, so 13 wounds, 7-inch move, and he has a Piercing 1 bolt pistol, which is pretty good, and combat knives, 5 attacks on 3s, 4/5 damage. The reason that the Headtaker is so important here is because he treats all vertical distances climbing as 2 inches, and he drops for free, so he can get very similar threat ranges to a Howling Banshee with Acrobatic, which is important to keep in mind is potentially a problem. And he has the Clandestine Headtaker rule. This lets him charge from conceal, and it lets him push 2 hits the first time you strike, as long as his target wasn't visible to him at the start of his activation. So if he's coming over walls, he can potentially double hit and kill a model without you being able to do anything about it. And he can potentially do this in 2 fight actions if you're clustered up and he's able to get that charge. So stay spread out. Don't give him the opportunity to do that. And otherwise he's just a 13 wound guy and you can kill him. The final model I want to talk about briefly is the Deathwatch Marksman veteran. Now he has a bolter with a heavy profile as well, and the heavy profile is more accurate. It goes to 3/5 damage, lethal 5-up, and piercing crits 1, which is a hell of a profile. What this guy does is he can perform the guard action on any kill zone, which can be tough to play around if you need to move out into the open. And on the close quarters rules, he can, after he has done a guard shot, go on guard again for free. So this guy can be really good at locking down big rooms on ITD, and you need to know if your opponent's playing him and where he is on the board so you can have a plan to get around him, especially because one of the best pieces of counterplay to a model like this used to be positioning to get obscured if they try to guard shot you, but they have a firefight ploy to ignore that, which is an excellent segue into ploys. I think there's really one strategic ploy that's very important here, and that is the Shield That Slays. The Shield That Slays gives Deathwatch operatives within their opponent's territory -1 damage from normal and critical damage of 4 or more. And so if they are on the center line or forward, they've got some damage reduction, and that combined with their 15 wounds breakpoint makes them pretty tough. They also have access to a little bit of healing from one of their equipment, so just keep that in mind. It's similar to playing into Plague Marines. You don't want to deal a lot of chip damage to multiple models and leave them alive. They'll just keep healing back. You want to deal chip damage and finish off singular models before they get to activate a second time. And then in terms of firefight ploys, all 4 of these are really relevant. The first is Suffer Not the Alien, and this gives them Relentless on one of their attack rolls. Now, we do have Contempt, which can shut this down. And because Deathwatch don't have a lot of other sources of rerolls, I think it is really important to try and have that extra command point for Contempt in your back pocket in case they flub a roll. They also have Auspicator Tracking. They can use this firefight ploy when they are counteracting before they perform any actions and change a model's order. So, they can use this to change a model onto engage so that it can then counteract and shoot, or, charge and fight. They can also use it if they have somebody on engage to change them back to conceal and then duck into cover. So, there's a lot of different ways they can use this. You do want to keep it in mind. And if there's an enemy model that is, say on low wounds and exposed near some cover, it might be worth activating and trying to kill them right away so that they don't have the option to counteract and go back on conceal and stay safe. Next is the Advanced Ausspec Scan. This allows them to get Saturate and ignore Obscuring on a shoot action. Until the end of the activation or counteraction, so they can potentially do multiple shoot actions with this up. And this is really important because you'll see, top level play, a lot of those sort of inside-outside shooting tricks and using Obscuring. Obscuring can be really useful to avoid deadly guard shots in ITD, and this can get around it. Okay, sorry for the hard cut. Having sound issues, but I'm back. We've talked about the TAC ops. Now let's try and kind of put the whole thing together. So Deathwatch have access to security or seek and destroy TAC ops. And in Approved Ops 2025, these TAC ops are very different than last time. Last year, they would be able to take security TAC ops like Contain or Take Ground and kind of passively camp their side of the board and score their TAC ops. That is not the case anymore. They're going to have to come across the center line if they want to score pretty much any of their TAC ops options, which is kind of where we want them, because we want them close enough that we can get multiple of our models to attack one of theirs. And, they only benefit from their damage reduction if they're over the center line. They have a lot of really strong melee pieces, but, this is kind of force them to play the type of game that we want to play. And I think there's really 2 effective ways to go about it, in my opinion. I know that in the past, there's a lot of people that have sworn by Mono Banshees going into Space Marine teams, but I think that is significantly worse against Deathwatch than it is against any of the other Space Marine teams. The reason being that while you can still deal some damage to them with Banshees, because of the damage reduction, the breakpoints are just really bad. Previously it wasn't crazy to charge Rainateers, crit for 6, fall back and throw a ceaseless crack grenade and pick up a Space Marine from full health. But that isn't going to happen against a Deathwatch model on our half of the board, and the Aegis just does not care about crack grenades at all, since he ignores the piercing 1, has a 2-up save, and has damage reduction. So, what do we do here? I think that there's 2 approaches. Like I said, the first is to take a mixed team and probably running either the Dire Avenger Exarch with a Twin Shuriken Catapult or the Striking Scorpion Exarch with a Claw. These are our 2 best options to put out a lot of damage, and that's kind of what we need here. You can use your Dire Avengers to, play safe, use their APL 3 and Slicing Hurricane to end completely out of line of sight while still putting out some damage. And then use your Banshees to harass, and your Scorpions to ideally finish models off. And this works pretty well, because even though they have damage reduction, all of the things that damage a Space Marine still damage a Deathwatch model. And while they each have 15 wounds and have some damage reduction, there's only 5 of them. So all it takes is 1 or 2 Shuriken shots to really spike damage, and then my models are on their way out. Even if the Shuriken crits are only hitting for 3, they're probably not saving them. So, that's one approach, and I think it works very well. What I've enjoyed most, however, is running all striking scorpions, which may seem like a strange pick, and I think it works significantly better into Deathwatch than it does into other Space Marine teams because there's only 5 of them, so they just have less coverage on the board. The game plan here being to take the Claw Exarch, and he's kind of your heavy hitter, your can opener, and the rest of your models are there to try and chip things down. This works because you have access to using each of the Scorpion techniques twice in a turn, and they're really effective here. One with the Gloom giving you that super conceal, letting you stage safely where you need to be. You have 2 accesses to Strike and Fade, which is huge, because while the Deathwatch are going to be really good at killing anything that's exposed, if you're ending on conceal behind some heavy cover, they just can't get at you, so they can't kill you unless they're within 2 inches. So Strike and Fade helps you kind of avoid trading models on the back end. The other thing here that's huge and that I think really makes this work is that if the Deathwatch models have to come to us and we outnumber them, we have time to wait. We can sort of watch where they're moving, play passively, and then end the turning point trying to remove models. And having 2 uses of Patient Stalk Sudden Blow is really good for that. A lot of the discussion about Deathwatch when the rules were first spoiled was about how busted the Aegis was. Like, oh, nothing in the game can kill him, this model's nuts. Well, a Striking Scorpion Warrior can dash 3 inches and then reposition 7, so they're moving 10 inches across the board on conceal, still have an APL to do a mission action or attack op action, and they're dealing D3 plus 2 damage to a model they walk by. 10 inches is a lot of ground to cover, so you can oftentimes, if they push something up the board aggressively, you can dash, walk by it, get into cover somewhere else where you're fairly safe. You do that twice, charge with the 3rd model, and whatever your target is has taken 2d3 plus 2 damage before the fight action, then 2 damage from Manda Blasters, and then you're rolling dice. It makes them so easy to drop. And if you... so you're dealing anywhere between 6 and 2d3 plus 6. So anywhere between 8 and 12 damage before your first melee die. It's nuts. I don't think it's nuts, but it is quite good. And I think that it's particularly good into Deathwatch. This is my favorite time to run all Scorpions. So, now that does kind of force you into playing a little bit more aggressive tac ops, since you have to go seek and destroy or recon. I particularly like Steel Intelligence, since they do have to come to us, and I've been very successful with it so far. But, let me know how it works for you. And I think that covers just about everything I wanted to go over on Deathwatch. I'm going to try and keep this one a little bit shorter than some past videos. I hope you've been enjoying some adequate Blades of Khaine content. Please like and subscribe to the channel. And I would appreciate some feedback for these matchup videos if you are fine with the sort of 25-minute length that they've mostly been running so far, or if you would prefer them a little bit shorter, a little bit less detail on like exactly what certain abilities do, since I'm putting the cards up anyways. Whatever's more useful to folks is what I will do, so just let me know. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully I see you at a tournament soon. Bye.